this joint meeting had been on the cards for a very, very long time. So the objective of a joint meeting of the Financial Opportunities Forum and the Rotary Club of Bombay Midtown was that the Financial Opportunities Forum around 11, 12 years back actually started off with Rotarians of the Bombay Midtown. And over a period of time, that linkage has not remained as strong as it was at the beginning. So the objective always was that the members of the Financial Opportunities Forum get to know more of the Rotarians of Bombay Midtown and vice versa, and we get to know each other's activities. So FOF members get to know all the wonderful projects that Rotary Club of Bombay Midtown does, and Midtowners get to know all the knowledge sharing that happens under the FOF forum. So while today it may not be the best opportunity for people to mingle among themselves, and on a video call there's only so much that one can do, but at least in this pandemic we finally managed to get the joint meeting going, so I'm happy about that. Topic today is on REITs and investment trusts. Now I know that we have done two sessions in the past in Financial Opportunities Forum on REITs. However, those earlier two sessions were more theoretical in nature, purely from the point of view of REITs were always about to launch, but actual listings had not happened at that point in time. So today, when we are actually talking about REITs and InvITs, we are talking about instruments in which people can do purchase sale transactions. So these are actual instruments on which there can be some investment action. So firstly, it's not just theoretical. The other reason why I thought of this topic today is that almost every seminar that I address, at the end of it in the Q&A, there are one or two questions which basically have this theme that today interest rates have come down very, very drastically. So retirees or people of advanced age, seniors, where do they invest? What are the instruments available for seniors where they get some amount of cash flow regularly to meet their needs, and there is some element of inflation protection or some element of growth over a period of time. People are not very comfortable taking equity risk. At the same time, the bank FD rates have fallen to 5.5%, where again you have to pay tax on that. So post-tax returns have really come down. People have had problems with direct corporate fixed deposits as well as corporate debt mutual funds. So in the current tough economic situation, we have seen defaults from Island FS, from DHFL, SL Group, and so many others. So that has created problems for investors who are looking for a fixed income. So that possibility is there with REITs and InvITs, which we are going to talk about today, and Raj will be making a formal presentation on it. I'll just briefly highlight some of the key points in these instruments. REITs as such are not very, very complicated. So most people understand real estate as a investment. You buy either a residential flat, or you buy an office or a mall or whatever, and you let it out to tenants. Tenants pay you periodic rent for occupying and using the premises, and over a period of time, typically, not in all cases, but typically, the value of the property goes up. So the investor gains on account of two factors. Firstly, the periodic cash flow, be it rental or lease rent as it's called in some cases, and second is capital appreciation. This is the good part. So you can touch and feel your property, you can actually see what you own instead of a equity share which is nebulous. You are part owner of a business, but you don't really know how to value a business. But there are numerous problems with real estate investments. Uh, Primarily, residential real estate is giving you very low rental yield, uh, anywhere ranging from 1 or 2% or 3% per annum. So, which is not really a great return. And again, the capital appreciation has not been there in residential real estate for a very long time. So that has caused this asset class to lose its attraction for uh, investors. The other problem is that it's very illiquid, and it has high ticket sizes. So let's say if a flat is available for 5 crores, you cannot say I have 50 lakh of rupees, give me 1/10 of a flat. You can't do partial transactions. Again, even if you pull together 5 crores and buy a flat, let's say later on you need 1 crore of rupees, you cannot sell 20% of the flat. So that's the one issue that is there. Price transparency is not there. So there's a lot of tough negotiation that is to be done, lot of research that is to be done in terms of arriving at the price. Transactions are not easy. There's a stamp duty to be paid, registration charges, brokerage to the broker. Various issues are there. Again, if you buy under construction property, it may not get completed, and that may cause its own challenges. So to overcome these challenges, world over, an instrument called Real Estate Investment Trust has been innovated. So it's been existing in developed countries for a long period of time. It's just that in India, it's more of a recent introduction. We have had these only for last 2-3 years now, and we have two real estate investment trusts listed in India. So one is called Embassy Office Parks, and the other is the Mindspace REIT. So the details will be shared by Raj in the presentation, but just to give you a gist of it, it's something which can give you something like 6% per annum kind of income stream, which can grow somewhere about 3, 4, 5% per annum. So the income that you get is not fixed; it keeps growing over a period of time, hopefully, and there is a possibility of capital appreciation in the long run. Again, just like real estate prices go up and down, the REIT value on the REIT price on the stock exchange can go up and down. So it's not like a government bond or anything like that. So there is an element of price risk which goes up and down. But if you are dependent on periodic cash flows, this can be a good alternative to equity shares and to your debt investments. So with that, I'll hand over the presentation to Raj. Raj is my colleague at PPFAS. We have worked together for more than 8 years now, and like me, he's again a chartered accountant by qualification, chartered accountant and CFA. So over to you, Raj.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rajiv, for your introduction. So today I will be covering the topic of REITs and InvITs and how you can think of it as an alternate investment opportunity. So typically a portfolio will have allocation to equity and debt and some small allocation to gold. But this is also an asset class which needs to be considered going ahead as a diversification tool in your portfolio. Uh, Coming to the next slide, so basics of real estate, I think Rajiv has covered all the points, so I'll just skip this slide. uh, so yeah, do you want to own Express Towers, the full tower, or do you want to own a Hilton hotel, or do you want to own Oberoi Mall? All this with liquidity and with small investment, then this is possible through a REIT. So we'll be looking at REITs first, and then going ahead, we'll be looking at InvITs. Anytime during the presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the Q&A tab, or we can then raise your hand, and then we'll come to you during the Q&A session. So what is a REIT? REIT stands for Real Estate Investment Trust. It's basically a closed-end structure where the number of units are fixed at the time of the IPO itself. So the number of units don't increase, but they are tradable and liquid. So they are tradable on the stock markets. You can buy it from your stockbroker itself, and it's accessible to any retail investor. The good thing about this is that just like a mutual fund, for REITs, the decisions are taken by the professional experts who are experts in the real estate space. And you can get exposure to assets like malls, business towers, or telecom infrastructure, or any other asset where you personally cannot invest a huge sum. The only catch here is that you cannot invest in some assets like vacant land, agricultural land, and mortgages. So we look at the types of REITs now. So basically, there are two types of REITs. One category is the equity REITs, where you have direct exposure to the real estate assets, and the second type of asset is the mortgage REITs. So mortgage REITs, I'll briefly cover. So mortgage REITs is something where you are basically lending to the people who want to own real estate assets, or you are investing in mortgage backed securities. So this is something which is quasi lending, and it's actually not a real estate investment trust in the true sense. uh, let's look at equity REITs in detail. So equity REITs typically are classified into four categories. One is commercial REITs, where they invest in commercial properties. Second is residential REITs, where they invest in residential properties. Third is industrial REITs, where you invest in warehouses, industrial parks, e-commerce fulfillment centers, etc. And the fourth category currently is healthcare REITs, where you invest in hospitals, medical centers, clinics. Going ahead, you might see some specialized REITs in specific niche categories as well. But right now, these are the types of REITs which are common. And in India, currently the residential REITs is something which is not feasible given the rental yields which are very low in India. Commercial REITs are right now possible because of the rental yields that are there prevailing in the market. Now, let's look at the typical structure of a REIT. How does it work? So, uh, if if you are aware of a mutual fund structure or a asset management company structure, it's very similar to that. What happens is there is an investment manager who manages the property of the REITs, and they charge fees to the REIT, for which they get management fees. Then there is a sponsor or a investor which basically promotes the REIT. Just as an example, in Embassy REITs, Embassy Parks and Blackstone are the sponsors to the REIT, and they basically own the REIT, and they in turn get the distribution of the cash flows from the REIT. Trustee is someone who holds the REIT's assets in the trust for the benefit of the unit holders. So they just overlook the activities of the trust and see to it that nothing wrong is happening with the unit holders of the REIT. Now coming to the REIT holding real estate assets. So there are three ways in which they typically hold real estate assets. One is direct ownership of the real estate assets. Second is through the holding company structure, where REIT holds a stake in the holding company, and then holding company has many SPVs through which they own the real estate assets. Third is the structure where REITs directly own in the SPVs, and SPVs can be many depending on the number of assets that they have. So let us look at how REITs have fared globally. So real estate investment trust as an asset class has been there in US since 1960s, and currently the market cap of REITs globally is around $2 trillion, which is about 60% of the real estate market cap. And there are about 225 listed REITs in US today. Now, out of the total 2 trillion market cap globally, 66% of it is in US, 10% is in Europe, balance is in other countries. So currently apex is only 14, apec Asia Pacific is only 14%, but so this is the only place where China is behind us. So China doesn't have any REITs right now, but they are working on it currently. So let's look at how the regulatory framework has developed in India. So originally, this REIT structure was, introduced in 2007. So draft REIT regulations were released sometime in 2007. After which the revised ones came directly in 2013. So it took 6 years to come out with the revised regulations. But if you see the timeline post that, it's been really quick. So post 2013, these things, the regulatory timelines were squeezed, and they introduced and made changes very fast. So in July 2014, they released the draft InvIT regulations as well, and after which it was approved sometime in August 2014. So in 2015, in the budget, tax framework was also introduced, and till date, many changes have been made in the regulations as well as taxation side. We'll look at them in the later slides. So why look at REITs and InvITs now? So one is that there is a clarity on the regulation side. So in the initial years, there were a lot of complications and confusion regarding a few of the regulations that were there. But now we have some clarity around that. Also on the taxation side, there is some clarity. In this budget also, they have made some changes which have helped InvITs in some way. And uh, earlier what was happening was that the GSECs were trading at about 7-8%, and the rental yields were also around that only. So the spread between the GSEC and the rental yield was very low, so making this asset very less attractive compared to a GSEC. And now that the interest rates have fallen and the fixed income yields are somewhere around 5-6%, depending on the credit risk that you take, this asset class is interesting going ahead. And residential REITs, as I said, in India are sometime away, given that the rental yields are very low. So let's look at what are the investment characteristics of the REIT. So right now, if you want to invest in an IPO of any REIT, the minimum investment is 50,000. So this originally was around 2 lakh rupees, which has now been reduced to 50,000. They have made it more accessible to the retail investors. And post IPO, if you want to trade in the market, the minimum lot size is 100 units. Uh, and and it is freely transferable, given that it is listed on the stock exchange. So as I said, you can transact REITs through your stockbroker. There is no entry or exit load on REITs. Coming to the portfolio, so typical portfolio is grade A assets. So real estate assets are classified into grades, and grade A is typically the top 6 cities that are there in India. We'll look at the top 6 cities, and you will have multiple tenants across various sectors, and MNCs will form a major part of the tenant group. Return profile. So return has two aspects. One is the regular rental income that you get, and the second is the capital appreciation of the real estate assets that are owned in the REIT. Coming to the tax treatment, dividends that the REITs distribute are tax exempt currently, and on sale of REITs, you are taxed at 10 to 15%. We'll have a look at this in detail going ahead. As I said, they are professionally managed, and good negotiation power is there with the tenants, and they have ability to grow the portfolio. The conditions which are there on REITs regulation wise is that at least 80% of the assets must be completed, and they must be income generating properties. So you cannot have under construction properties or properties that are not giving rent more than 20%. There are restrictions on speculative land acquisition, and another restriction which is very good for the unit holders is that minimum 90% of the distributable cash flows that the REIT receives has to be distributed semi-annually. So semi-annually is the regulation that is there. But if you look at the REITs that are listed right now, they typically distribute every quarter. Coming to the debt that the REIT can have, so if the debt exceeds 25%, majority unit holder is approval is required. But the max that they can go is 49% of the asset value of the real estate assets that they own. Also, SEBI has looked at the minority shareholder interests very carefully, and that's why you have many independent directors on board. Any related party transactions require approval from the unrelated shareholders, etc. So regulation wise, SEBI has done a really good job on this, and we are almost at par with the global standards on REITs and InvITs. Now, let's come to the advantages from a developer perspective. Why should a developer come out with a REIT IPO? So, first is obviously to raise money for expansion of their operations. Second is if the developer is leveraged, then this can help them deleverage and pay down their debts. Third is to increase the market value since it is listed now. Fourth is to make more acquisitions. So once you raise money, you have more money to spend and you can acquire more assets. Also, you can leverage a little bit. Fifth is to retain employees. So what happens is once it is listed, you can give stock options to your employees and try and retain the key employees that are there. And sixth is obviously providing liquidity to the shareholders. So the shareholders are also willing to give you money. Now let's look at the real estate landscape in India. Mainly, let's focus on the commercial side of it and top 6 cities. So that comprises of the grade A assets which the REITs typically invest in. So this is the top 6 cities market share by net absorption. So what I mean by net absorption is out of say 100 real estate properties, how many are actually leased out. And if you look at the market shares, Hyderabad is the top city with about 23% market share, followed by NCR region, which is 22%. Bangalore is around 20%. Pune is around 16%. And Mumbai metropolitan region is around 16%, followed by Chennai, which is about 2.5%. So typically you will see cities which are tech oriented are more on the commercial side, and that's why you see Hyderabad also coming up as a commercial real estate space. If you look at the sectors which typically lease out commercial properties, so 38% of the properties are leased out by the technology sector, followed by financial services, which is about 13%. Both of them are employee heavy sectors, and that's why you see more commercial space being used by them, followed by manufacturing, which is only 8%. Healthcare is about 4%, and then there are some upcoming sectors like e-commerce, media and telecom, etc. So what has been the trend? So this is a report which has been published by CNW, which is Cushman and Wakefield. It's a real estate publication, and they usually give data for the future as well. So you can ignore the future data, but if you look at the past data, the vacancy rates graph is in the pink color, if you can see. So the vacancy rate is about 10% in India over the past 5 or 6 years. So if you have 100 properties, 90 of them are leased out and 10 of them are vacant currently. So let's look at the current and the potential REIT listings. So there are 2 listed ones right now. One is Embassy Office Parks and second is Mindspace. There are 4 others which are in the pipeline and they might come out with the IPO in the near future. One is Brookfield, second is DLF GIC, third is Prestige Office, fourth is Panchsheel Realty, and fifth is RMZ Corp. So the figures that are there are in million square feet. Mindspace and Embassy both are very similar in terms of space that they have. But if you look at the markets, all the players are in different markets, and if you really want to go into deep, you need to understand different markets and the different the geographical diversification, the demographic diversification that each of the cities have. So let's look at Embassy and Mindspace now, and let's compare both of them. Since both of them are listed, the information that is there in public. So the operating square feet area for Embassy is about 26.2 million square feet, and for Mindspace it's about 23 million square feet. The current committed occupancy. So what do I mean by committed occupancy is how much percentage of the square feet is committed by the tenants for the near future. So 93% of the properties are leased out currently by Embassy and 92% for Mindspace. Under construction for both of them is around 2.6 to 2.8 million square feet, and future development that they have planned is around 3.6 to 4.5 million square feet. So if you look at the total square feet that they have, Embassy has around 33 million square feet and Mindspace is around 30 million square feet. Out of this, percentage of construction which is completed is about 90 to 91%. The regulatory guideline says you need to be above 80%. So both of them are much above the regulatory guideline. Now let's look at which cities both these REITs are present in. So Embassy is majorly present in Bengaluru, which 55% of its assets are in Bengaluru, with some of them in Mumbai, Pune, and other cities. If you look at Mindspace, it's a little more diversified, with Hyderabad and Mumbai, both of them contributing equally about 38-39% of the assets. Pune is 18%, Chennai is 3%, and others is about 2%. If you look at the tenants, so both of them command, MNCs as their big tenants. So Embassy has about 78% of the tenants as MNCs. Mindspace has about 85%, and top 10 tenants contribute about 41 to 42% of the rent that they get. So what happens is that if no tenant is big enough that if one of them leaves, then it doesn't impact the financials of the REIT. From sector point of view, if you look at Embassy, 50% of it is technology, 32% is others, financial services is about 12%. Mindspace, 44% is technology, 22% is financial services, and 27% is others. So both of them are technology heavy. Commercial space as such is technology heavy, followed by financial services. Now coming to the sponsors, so sponsors of Embassy are Embassy offices and Blackstone. So Embassy offices has about 15% stake, whereas Blackstone has about 47% stake in the REIT. And since it is listed, 38% is owned by the others. In Mindspace, Blackstone also owns 10%, and 65% is owned by K. Raheja Group. It's a very well-known group in real estate, and 20% is owned by others. Now let's look at the taxation in detail. So there are two ways in which REIT typically distributes income. One is dividend and second is interest. Most of it is dividends. Sometimes they distribute interest as well in some conditions. Dividends distributed by REITs are exempt. The only condition here is that the SPVs that is distributing the dividends should not have opted for a concessional tax regime. So just to put it in a nutshell, both Mindspace and Embassy both have SPVs which have not opted for a concessional tax rate, and that's why whatever dividends that you receive from both these REITs are tax free for you. Whatever interest that you receive is taxable at your applicable slab rate. and whatever capital gains and other income that the REIT receives is exempt in the hands of the REIT. But if you happen to sell the REIT units, then it is taxable just like yeah, the equities. Only difference is that you need to hold it for 3 years. So short term for REITs is 3 years. If you hold it for 3 years, then your taxation LTCG is applicable, and you pay only 10% on gains above 1 lakhs. But if you sell it within 3 years, then the short-term capital gain tax is applicable, and you pay 15%. So how do you value a REIT? There are two ways. So one is NAV of the REIT is declared quarterly. So what they do is NAV is calculated by taking all the market value of the properties and they minus the debt of the REIT. So typically the market price of the REIT is at a small discount or a premium to the NAV of the REIT. Uh, if you look at the history of both the listed players, uh, there is hardly any discount or premium. So it generally trades around the NAV, and it is disclosed publicly quarterly, so you can have a look at it. Second method is DCF, something like a DCF of a company. So what happens is you can calculate net operating income of the REIT, and you can do it for the next 10 years, discounted by the cap rate. Now, what is cap rate? We'll come to the cap rate in a while. You discount it by the cap rate, and the 11th year net operating income, you can consider it in the terminal value. So cap rates are typically a function of demand and supply, and office cap rates in India currently are around 7.5 to 8%, depending on the valuations that have been used for both Mindspace and Embassy. Over the last decade, these rates have come down drastically. So they were somewhere around 12% in 2012-13. They have come down to 7.5, 8%. They are unlikely to go up in the medium to long term, although near term uncertainty might be there because of COVID and other issues. So, what are the key metrics that you need to track when you actually are looking at a REIT? One is the weighted average lease expiry. So, weighted average lease expiry is nothing but when are your tenants' leases expiring. So, if the weighted average lease expiry is 4 years, it means that over a period of 4 years, all your tenants will go away and your properties will be vacant. But obviously, if the weighted average is 4 years, some will be 2 years, some will be 5 years, some will be 6 years. But if the higher the weighted average lease expiry, the better for the REIT. Second is the committed occupancy or the vacancy rate. So committed occupancy is, as I said, percentage of the assets that are leased out, and a vacancy rate is exactly the opposite of it. So you need to track that. It should be somewhere in the range of 90% plus. Third metric that you need to keep a track of is the concentration of the top 10 tenants. If any single tenant is forming a large part of the rent that the REIT is receiving, then it's a problem if that tenant goes away. Fourth is a little lower in the hierarchy, but you need to have a look at the sector and the asset concentration that they have across geographies. So we have had a look at REITs in brief, and as Rajiv said in his introductory remarks, it is somewhere between equity and fixed income. So that will give you a regular and growing cash yield in terms of rent, and then it will give you a capital appreciation as well. So it's somewhere in between. Returns wise, also it's somewhere in between currently fixed income and equities. Fixed in around 5-6%. Equity would be 10-12%, and REITs currently are at about 6 to 8%. So this is the data that I have pulled from US. So since US has had about 50 years plus kind of history in terms of REITs, I thought I'll just pull out the returns data of all the REITs that have been listed in US and compare it with the equity returns. So there is an association of REITs which is called NAREIT, National Association of REITs, which publishes this data every month. So let's look at all equity REITs. If you look at the data from 1970 to 2020, which is the last row, it's about 11.37%, whereas S&P 500 has yielded 10.48%, Nasdaq has yielded 8.93%, Dow Jones has yielded 7.19%, and this is a long enough period. So this is roughly 48 years of history. So in shorter term, obviously, equity markets have done well in the last 5 and 10 years. But if you look at the longer term track record, equity REITs have outperformed the equity markets. Obviously, US is a different geography and different demographics are there. So it's not right to compare US with India and think that in India also REITs will give a better return than equities. But this is just to put in place what has happened in US. Also in US, typically what they measure is what is the spread about the treasury yield that is there. So they compare it with the 10-year treasury yield. If the gap between the 10-year treasury yield and the REITs is high enough, then people typically switch from treasury securities to REITs. And if you look at it over the years, the except for 2008-9 when the treasury yields dropped significantly and the REITs were there, there has been a significant gap between the two of them. As I said, it provides a good diversification opportunity in our portfolio. So let's look at the correlation between what REIT has with the equity markets. So if you look at the NAREIT equity correlation with S&P 500, it's about 0.66. With Nasdaq Composite, it's about 0.53. S&P Utilities, which has power and everything in the index, it's about 0.38. Dow Jones is about 0.61. So typically the correlation is 0.5 to 0.6, and it's very low. And that's why it provides a very good diversification opportunity in addition to the debt and equity that you hold in your portfolio. So just to give the sources that I have used for this presentation, this is just the REITs part. One is investing in REITs book, which I referred to. Second, obviously, is the offer documents of both Mindspace and Embassy. They have given details that are very good to read, and it gives a good understanding of the REIT industry. And third is the NAREIT website, which I said, National Association of REITs. So I have talked about all the good things about REITs. Now let's look at the risks. So one obvious risk is that with COVID, you would think that many people will start working from home and no one will buy offices and the demand will come down for the commercial space. So that is something which is a risk going ahead. Oversupply in India in the commercial side is the risk of that is very low, but still it's a risk that can be there. There can be a risk of changing trends or location preferences. So right now, top 6 cities account for a major portion of the real estate assets, especially the commercial assets that are there. But if people choose to work from smaller towns, then these big cities might face trouble. And work from home trend, which I said, there can be a renegotiation of the existing contracts that are there at lower rates if the demand goes down substantially. And the last risk is obviously the interest rate cycle. If interest rates go up suddenly and the REIT yields stay there, then people might shift to fixed income than REITs. The good thing about this is that even after COVID, if you look at the data that has been released by both the REITs, they say that 95% plus of the rentals have been collected since the lockdown. So they haven't faced any problem in collecting the rentals for the properties that have been leased. So this was an interesting tweet by Uday Kotak. So sometime back on 17th August. So he tweeted that San Francisco, which typically has all the technology companies there, it reported a 96% increase in empty homes, due to higher cost of living, taxes, and the virus risk that it had. So, what work from home has done is that people have moved from San Francisco to the smaller towns around it, and that has resulted in a huge, fall in demand for homes in San Francisco. So, this remains a risk. Now, all this that I said was very theoretical. Let's look at the numbers first. So let's look at embassy numbers first, given that it has been listed for a long time now. Mindspace got listed last month only, so don't have too many numbers for it. So Embassy REIT got listed on 1st April 2019. The issue price was 300 rupees. On the first day, it closed at about 314 rupees, and the current market price is around 360 rupees. So this is the capital appreciation that you got from 300 to 360, and plus you got a dividend of rupees 24.39 per unit for FY20, plus they have distributed it for the first quarter as well. So if you look at the dividend income which was there for the previous year, the dividend yield comes out to around 8% on the IPO price, and around 6.5 to 7% on the current price. And if you include the capital appreciation that it has given in terms of price, the XIRR comes out to about 13.82%. So not a bad investment till date. If you look at Mindspace REIT, the IPO came in at about 275 rupees, and the current market price is 315 rupees. Since it was listed last month only, we don't have the distribution details, but what they have indicated in the IPO document is that the rental yield or the dividend distribution that they will do will be in the range of 7 to 7.5%. Now, we have looked at REITs. Let's go to InvITs. So, what is an InvIT? InvIT is Infrastructure Investment Trust. It's basically a REIT only, but a modified version of REIT, specifically designed for the infrastructure assets. Typically, an InvIT is a little more complicated than a REIT, given that it can invest in different assets across different sectors, and each InvIT will be unique. So we look at the sectors that InvIT can invest in, and it can have very contrasting returns. So I have taken two examples of InvITs which are listed, and I'll show you the returns that both of them are given. It's very contrasting, and we'll look at them. So what are the sectors that are covered for InvITs? Where can InvITs invest in? One is transport and logistics. So that includes your roads, bridges, ports, airports, etc. Everything. Energy, it includes electricity generation, transmission, distribution, gas and oil storage facility. Water and sanitation, communication, which includes your telecom, fixed network, towers and services. And then also other assets like affordable housing, educational institutions, sports infrastructure, hospitals, hotels, etc. So it's a wide range of assets that an InvIT can invest in, and that's why it's more complicated. So you need to have specific domain knowledge of different assets, and you need to go into detail. So for example, if you are investing in a InvIT which has invested in toll roads, you need to know how that toll road is doing, what will be the traffic growth, etc. Now let's look at the categories of InvITs that are present in India. So first one is the publicly offered InvITs, which are basically listed in India and offered to the public during the IPO. They are mandated to hold 80% of the assets in completed and revenue generating projects. So just like a REIT, it also has to invest 80% in these projects, and there have to be minimum 20 investors. So there are two currently publicly offered InvITs. We'll have a look at them. One is into power and transmission assets, and second one is into road projects. Second category is privately placed InvITs. So the only difference here is that it can invest more than 80% in eligible infrastructure projects. So eligible infrastructure projects has a specific definition. We'll have a look at it in the next slide. It's basically a private placement which is done with some selected investors, and it can have minimum of 5 investors and a maximum of 1,000 investors. This also has to be listed after the private placement. And the third one is the privately placed but the unlisted InvIT. So these are not listed for your investment. It has maximum of 20 investors, and it can invest more than 80% in the eligible infrastructure project. So what is an eligible infrastructure project? Let's divide it into two projects. One is PPP projects, which is public and private partnership projects, and second is the non-public and private projects. So it's a little technical here. So basically, non-PPP projects need to receive all the requisite approvals and certification for for commencing the construction of the project. Whereas if you look at the PPP projects, there are some relaxations which have been given. So I'll not go into detail of the technical aspects here. So let's look at the current and the potential InvIT listings. So the first two, which I said, are publicly listed InvITs which are available for your investment. First one is India Grid Trust, and the sponsor there is Sterlite, which is into power transmission assets. Second one is the IRB Infrastructure Trust. The sponsor is IRB Infra, and it is into road assets. Then there are two other privately placed InvITs which are listed now. India Infrastructure Trust, which are owned, sponsored by L&T and IDPL, and Oriental Infrastructure, which is owned by Oriental Tollways. There are three others for which draft offer documents have been placed, and we'll see them getting listed going ahead. So let's look at the two InvITs which are currently listed for in public, and let's look at how they have fared. So if you look at these two InvITs, they have given very contrasting returns. And let's look at IndiGrid first. So IndiGrid is India Grid Trust. It owns state power transmission assets in India. It was established in 2016, and sponsor, as I said, is Sterlite Power Grid Ventures. It currently owns about 6 assets, and it has right of first offer on 7 others which are owned by the sponsor company. The current IRR that is there on this InvIT is around 11 to 13%. So current market price is around 100 rupees per unit, and the distribution that they have committed to is about 12 rupees per unit, and this can obviously grow over a period of time. Power transmission contracts are usually long-term contracts, and there are no problems in collecting the payment. So toll roads, if you see, are long-term, but you never know when will people drive through your toll road, or when there are some collection issues as well. So there were some issues at the sponsor level and in IndiGrid. So what happened was that Sterlite had done some preferential allotment to two investors, KKR and GIC, for a 42% stake in May 2019. And then KKR had promised to buy another 15% from Sterlite. Recently what happened was that KKR said that we don't want to buy that 15%, and Sterlite had already pledged that 15%, so it was sold off to L&T and some other investors. L&T took about 5% stake recently, and some other investors took some stake. Also on the investment arm, so there was a conflict of interest litigation which was going on, and Sterlite was the sponsor as well as the investment manager So they sold off 60% of the stake in the investment arm also to KKR, and it continues to hold it. So basically everyone will ask kitna deti hai. So we remember the Maruti ad very well. So kitna deti hai, ye sab to theek hai, theoretical knowledge theek hai, but kitna deti hai. So India Grid Trust has been listed for about 3 years now, and this is the return that they have given. So the dark blue bar that you see is the dividend or the distribution that they have done over the last 3 years, and the price appreciation is in the gray bar. So this is from their own investor presentation, and they have compared it with the GSEC yield, Power Grid Corporation of India, and NSE 500 and other indexes. So if you look at the returns that they have given, the XIRR comes to about 12%, which is very similar to the price that it is trading at currently. Now let's come to IRB Invest. So the experience here for the investor hasn't been that good. So as I said, toll roads is something which is very difficult to understand for a layman investor, and toll collections are something which is not predictable. So typically management will give you an estimate that they have estimated the toll, the traffic growth to be around 5-6%, plus you will get an inflation of 3-4%, and that's how they estimate their collections and the dividend that will be distributed to the investors. So you need to evaluate each asset separately. uh, it got sometime listed in May 2017, and the track record for it hasn't been that good. So if you look at the distribution, so distribution is for the last year was around 10 rupees, and if you look at the issue price was around 100 rupees, but the current market price is 38. So it's fallen in terms of price appreciation, and the indicative IRR that they have, the management has given, is around 12 to 12.75%. I am reaching towards the end of my presentation, so let's come to the conclusion. So as I said, REITs are much easier to understand than InvITs. InvITs is a little complicated to understand. It is better to diversify through a portfolio of REITs. So don't concentrate on one geography or one sector or one sponsor. You can diversify it through a portfolio of REITs. You need to monitor the spread over the GSEC yields. So if the spread is higher, you invest in REITs. If the spread is lower, you can move to fixed income. The regulatory updates are something which have been happening in this space, and you need to keep a track of. And currently, we are, I think, at par with the global standards. So we can move on to the Q&A. If anyone has a question, please ask in the Q&A chat, or you can raise your hand. So one question which has been asked from Malav is how to judge the corporate governance in REIT and InvIT. So corporate governance as such doesn't play a big part. So obviously there is a sponsor, but then it's a trust structure. So it's very similar to a mutual fund. If you are investing in a mutual fund, you don't look at the corporate governance in the sponsor level. Obviously, there have been some safeguards which have been put in place by SEBI in terms of related party transactions, unit holders approval, etc. So it doesn't play a big role in while investing in REITs and InvITs. Ashish has asked a question. Dividend from REITs are tax free. What about dividends from InvITs? The taxation for both of them is very similar. So dividend from InvITs are also tax free, subject to a condition that the SPVs which are there are not taking the concessional tax rate.
I think Ms. Madhvi Vora has been unmuted. She had a question. She can go ahead and ask.
Sure.
Participants can unmute themselves if they wish to ask a question.
Can I ask a question, Rajiv?
Yeah, please go ahead.
what is the advantage? Why would a developer actually take up a REIT and dilute his assets by selling it to the market after doing so much effort to build it up and lease it out for a small? Does he get a large listing? Much higher than the market, like in the like in industries, you can get a much higher listing.
Sure. So, if you look at the cost of funding for developers, the cost of funding typically is north of 12% for most people, and in the private markets, the cost of funding is very, very high. Whereas on REITs, the yield on assets in terms of the current rental income can be as much as 6.5, 7% kind of thing. So developers are most excited by taking undeveloped land, constructing a mall, uh, making that mall popular, and then the mall appreciates in capital value, either a mall or a office complex or something like that. They are not interested in getting rental income for eternity from that asset. They would typically want to unlock their money and take that money and develop some new project rather than just going on getting rental yield. So they are able to offload their fully developed projects via this methodology. So the fixed income earners or seekers buy the REITs, whereas developers can unlock their past developments.
Do they get it at book value or at a higher value they are able to unlock?
No, it's not at book value. They sell it at market value. So let us say the uh, Embassy Park REIT, they would have picked up the Express Tower at its market value, and they get rental income by letting out Express Tower at Nariman Point. So people who buy the Embassy Park REIT will get their share of rental income from Express Tower. Now, a developer who's created Express Tower is not interested in continuing to own Express Tower and get the rental. The transfer is not at book value. Transfer is at market value.
So the listing value is usually the market value.
Yes.
Would you say like 300, Embassy listed at 300, that would be the market value of the assets put together?
Yes.
Not
Yes.
a future earning or anything like that included in that.
Yeah. So just to give a random hypothetical example, all these numbers are fictitious. So let us say a developer spent 150 rupees to construct all those assets, which are currently worth 300 rupees. So the developer will put those assets in the REIT and sell those REITs at 300 rupees. Those 300 rupee worth of assets are giving dividend income of, let's say, 20, 22, whatever is the dividend yield. So people who want regular income are happy to buy those assets at a 6 to 7% yield, which can go up over time with rent increases. And the developer is free to take that money and move on to the next project rather than being stuck with one asset.
Okay. Thanks.
The majority of the REIT funds, they are investing in, they're leasing out properties to technology companies. Now, technology companies like TCS and all of them have made announcements that they are going to adopt work from home. So they will be vacating these rental premises, you see. So how will, which means that the lease rentals accruing from these technology companies where 50% exposure is is uh, i- i- uh, of their portfolio exposure is to this technology companies will get affected. So how would that affect how would that affect the investors?
Yes, so work from home, if it becomes very, very popular and people either move to smaller towns since remote working is possible, or people work from their homes and don't come to their Bangalore offices, and the tenants start vacating it, then that would be a risk to the income, future income of these REITs. So as Raj mentioned in this presentation, there would be a lock-in period for the tenants. So everyone will not be able to vacate things overnight. So there would be staggered agreements when lock-in periods expire. But yes, if this trend were to become mainstream, where all the tech companies say we don't need offices anymore, then there would be surplus office capacity. I think Mr. Ashwin Shah also wanted to ask a question. Ashwin bhai, please go ahead. Ronak, I think he's still on mute. Okay, I think his connection has dropped out.
Got it now.
Yeah, okay. Ashwin bhai, please go ahead.
Yeah, Rajiv, I just want to know, some years back we had made a function presentation on that Noida toll company. Is that around now? Is there anywhere in the running?
Yeah, so Raj made a point on toll assets being very tricky, and IRB InvIT has not given that kind of great returns. Same is the case with Noida Toll Bridge. So Noida Toll Bridge still exists, and the company is still listed, but the UP High Court, the Allahabad High Court, actually cancelled the toll agreement for whatever reason. Now that is in appeal with the Supreme Court. So as of now, the company is not able to collect any toll, and the share price has come down very significantly. So in toll road assets, we have had this issue not only in IRB or in Noida toll bridge. So even the at the outskirts of Mumbai, I think Panvel Highway, again there was some decision of Maharashtra government where Sion Panvel Expressway there was a toll removal, and then there was some litigation, etc. So there has been a big policy risk angle on the toll road assets. Again, in the pandemic, in the current COVID lockdowns, for almost a month and a half, these roads were made toll free. So even though vehicles were plying the road, toll booth collectors were not allowed to collect toll. So I think for the time being, it's better not to venture into the road InvITs, and the REITs are a safer option where the uh, office complexes are privately owned, and even the tenants are private MNC organizations. So there's not much of a litigation possibility. Whereas if it's a policy related or a populism risk related asset like toll road, then there would be a issue. Yeah, Mr. RK is next. You have been unmuted, sir. So please go ahead.
Yeah. My question has been partly answered. That in view of the experience of Noida Toll Bridge and similar issues in Mumbai and Delhi Gurgaon toll way, why would anybody invest in IRB InvIT like instruments?
Yeah, true. The risk is too much. So we just included all the asset classes to complete the presentation. I don't think as of now the uh, InvITs with toll assets make a lot of sense. Mr. Anil Ambo has a question on why would one invest in REIT or InvIT instead of equity, which we understand better. So, Mr. Ambo, the motivations are different. So, equity, as we know, like within the last 6 months, we have had a 40% fall and then a dramatic rise, and it's been all over the place. Now, people who, and again, the dividend yield on most equity shares is around 1%, 1.5%, which really is not that high to meet the living expenses. If someone is expecting regular cash flow, then REITs will give you quarterly dividend. Again, the uh, dividend income is tax efficient as compared to, let's say, a bank fixed deposit, and you also have some possibility of capital appreciation over time and the income increasing. So REIT is basically lying in between your bank fixed deposit or debt instruments and your equity investments. So all three have their role to play, debt instruments, REITs and equity shares. But it really depends on what the objective of a individual is. Malav is next. Malav, please go ahead.
Yeah, Thank you for the opportunity. InvITs have been distributing in the form of interest rather than dividend. And if we look at REITs, then Embassy has three kinds of distribution. One is dividend, interest, and the third one is amortization of SPV level debt. So, what kind of taxability would be there, and how can an investor account it in his books of accounts?
Raj, you have the breakup of the.
Yeah, so dividend, as I said, is exempt in the hands of the investors as long as the SPV does not opt for a concessional tax rate. If the SPV is opting for a concessional tax rate, then it's taxable in the hands of the investor. Interest is taxable at your tax slab. Amortization of SPV level debt, I am not too sure about. So, on the taxation front, it would be better if you consult a tax expert. On the Embassy investor section, there is a FAQ section where they have specifically answered the tax related queries. So probably you can go there and see also.
Okay, but I just had one follow-up question regarding InvIT. Basically, what happens is that instead of distributing as dividend, they claim that due to some corporate structure, they distribute the income as interest, and then it is taxable in the hands of investors. So, if we look at a post-tax return for a person who is in a 30% slab rate, it might not sound as efficient as it might sound prima facie looking at it.
Yes, that's true. So the reason that they distribute it as interest is because of the huge debt that they have on their books. So if the SPV is having a debt and it's repaying the InvIT in the form of interest, then the InvIT also has to distribute it as interest. So that's the reason majority of the distribution that is done by the InvIT is in the form of interest, and it is taxable in the hands of investor.
Okay.
Raj, there's a question from Kavan Dalal. He's asking how important is the permanent sponsors stake in REITs?
So it is not that important. So the SEBI regulations currently say that at the time of the IPO, they need to have about 25% stake minimum. And post the IPO, they can reduce it to 15%. So over a period of time, SEBI is in fact motivating them to reduce the stake. So it is not that important in that sense.
Okay. Neeraj Jain has a question on IRB InvIT, where it's the yield apparently is almost 10%. So then what is the reason for the price of the InvIT on the exchanges to fall to 38 rupees, and at the current market price the yield would be even higher? So what's happening there?
So as I said, in road assets, it's very difficult to gauge the future income potential of the assets. You need to look at each asset individually. You cannot depend on the management estimates. So management estimates would say currently it's trading at about 20% IRR. But would you want to depend on it? It's a question mark. So again, for the first few months of the lockdown, all the roads, toll roads were closed, and no one paid tolls for the first few months. So the income for them has been low in the first quarter itself. And though they have got some concession from NHAI, etc., but still future collectability and future income is something which is difficult to gauge. So during the lockdown, it had even fallen to 25 rupees. It's come back to 40, but yeah, it might be too good to be true, as you said.
So another point I wanted to highlight, the difference between especially the road concession assets like IRB versus something like a REIT or a InvIT with transmission assets. So toll roads, typically you have a particular period for which you can collect toll, after which you have to hand over the road free of cost to the government. So toll roads are not like your office assets where you own offices and malls and towers permanently or perpetually. So some of the payouts that you get from toll roads are actually capital in nature. It's not really income. It's your own money coming back to you. So that's why the road yields will superficially look higher than those on REITs, because that cash flow will stop after a while. When the concession agreement comes to an end, after that you can't collect toll on that road any longer. So that's another difference one has to keep in mind when evaluating toll roads. Akbar has a question on macroeconomic climate and interplay with interest rates, and basically he's asking what is the kind of returns you see in future as compared to short-term debt funds.
So the current rental yields indicate returns somewhere between 6.5 to 7.5% on the listed in REITs that are there. And the short-term debt funds again depends on the category that you are investing in. So yeah, the returns for REITs would be somewhere in the range of 6.5 to 7.5 in terms of distribution, and the capital appreciation that you would get would be additional.
Okay, there's a question from Rajil Shah. What is our sense on residential REITs for India going forward? Because commercial REITs is restricted to top metros, and work from home may reduce the attraction over there. So is there a scope for residential REITs in India? So I'll maybe take that. So it's essentially a question of either rents going up or the capital values coming down in residential real estate. So currently the residential yields are in the region of 1.5 to 3%, which is not really attractive for packaging residential apartments into REITs. So if in the West these are very common. So where entire apartments or condominiums are owned by REITs and everyone is a tenant in that, and no one owns the houses and everyone pays a rent to the REIT. But in India the yields are currently very, very low. So maybe in future this could be a possibility, but at the current rental yields I don't think this is really a possibility. So I think that covers all the questions that came in both on chat and in the Q&A tab. I think most people would be unmuted, so if people want to interact among themselves, people can. So our formal part of the presentation comes to an end. So Vicky, if you have something to say to the forum members or to the Rotarians on call, please go ahead. Otherwise, people can interact among themselves. Our formal part comes to an end.
Thank you, Rajiv. You already covered. I have something to say to the panelists. Fabulous, amazing. As usual, Rajiv and Raj, you have always yearned to fill the gaps in our understanding and enhance our knowledge. And once again, you have succeeded. Thank you, Rajiv and Raj, for this very, very interesting talk. And if I must add, Rajiv, we are fortunate to have you as a member of our club. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Whenever things got rough, I always remember what my father used to say.
Running a business does test a man, my son. There are ups and downs, glorious highs, and sometimes a low that leaves you feeling defeated.
The character of a man and the character of a business are not very different, are they?
Yes. But when the chips are down, we must stand up, dust ourselves off, and motor on.
Volatility. It's a funny thing. It makes you question yourself and wonder if you've made all the right decisions.
Sure, you can question some of your decisions, but stay steadfast on your goals.
Dad always said, there are no shortcuts and no quick profits.
There are no free lunches, are there? There is only one
right way.
At PPFAS, we think like Rahul and his father. That volatility is a fact of running a business. And buying equity shares is like owning a part of that business. We use value investing principles to manage your money. This means we invest in the right businesses at reasonable prices and for a longer term.
PPFAS Mutual Fund. There's only one right way. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.